But the beaches of Long Island hid something darker than anyone dared imagine. For years, families whispered about the disappearances. Young women, daughters, mothers gone without a trace. Their names became case files, their lives reduced to headlines. And for more than a decade, their killer walked free. Before we continue, leave a comment below. Let me know which city you are watching from. It began on a cold December night in 2010. A police officer and his K-9 unit searched along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, looking for a missing woman named Shannan Gilbert. Instead, the dog found something else, the remains of another woman, and then another, and another. By the time investigators finished combing the stretch of sand, they had uncovered 4 bodies, all young women, all buried in a similar way. The public was horrified, but the deeper detectives dug, the more terrifying the picture became. Because Gilgo Beach wasn't just a graveyard, it was a hunting ground. The 4 women became known as the Gilgo 4. Each of them had worked as escorts, advertising online. Each had vanished while meeting a client. To many, they were forgotten, dismissed, but they were daughters, sisters, and friends. And their families never stopped fighting for answers. As one mother later said, "They wanted the world to forget them, but I refused to let my daughter become just bones in the sand." Detectives believed they had stumbled onto the work of a serial killer. But Gilgo Beach wasn't finished giving up its secrets. In the following months, police uncovered more remains, stretching across the barrier islands of Long Island. Not just women, but also a toddler, a man, even partial remains scattered across multiple sites. In total, at least 11 victims. The press called him the Long Island serial killer. The case became one of the largest unsolved mysteries in modern American history. But as years passed, leaves dried up. The case grew cold, and whispers spread that maybe the killer had vanished into thin air. The breakthrough, then, in 2022, a new task force was formed. Fresh eyes, new technology, and finally, answers. The break came not from DNA, but from something far more ordinary, a pickup truck. Investigators traced a dark Chevrolet Avalanche, spotted near the disappearance of one victim back in 2010. That vehicle belonged to one man, Rex Heuermann, an architect from Massapequa Park, a husband, a father of 2, a man who looked completely ordinary. But behind his ordinary facade lay a darkness no one could have imagined. On July 13th, 2023, police arrested 59-year-old Rex Heuermann outside his Manhattan office. Neighbors described him as quiet, reserved, but detectives uncovered a different side. Burner phones, disturbing internet searches, and chillingly, DNA from a discarded pizza crust that matched evidence found on victims. After more than a decade of fear and speculation, the Long Island serial killer finally had a name. But this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. For years, Heuermann lived just miles from Gilgo Beach. He built homes. He raised his family. He commuted to New York City, passing the very parkway where his victims lay buried. He attended neighborhood barbecues. He waved to his neighbors, all the while hiding the darkest of secrets. And in a cruel twist of irony, the families of the victims were dismissed for years, told their loved ones' cases weren't worth pursuing. Meanwhile, their killer lived comfortably among them. But here's the haunting part. Even with Heuermann behind bars, questions remain. Was he the only killer? Or were there others who used Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground? What about the victims whose cases don't fit his pattern? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, how many more are still out there, waiting to be found? Rex Heuermann sits in custody, but his trial has only begun. The evidence is mounting. The victims' families are demanding justice, and the world is finally hearing the voices of those silenced for too long. But in the shadows of Long Island, the whispers remain. Other names, other bodies, other secrets still buried in the sand. And as investigators peel back the layers of this case, they're beginning to fear one thing: that Gilgo Beach holds more horrors than anyone ever imagined. For over a decade, the Gilgo Beach murders haunted Long Island. 11 lives stolen, families left shattered, and a community forced to wonder if a predator was hiding among them. In 2023, The mask was finally ripped away. The world now knew his name, Rex Heuermann, an architect, a father, a neighbor. But the arrest was only the beginning. The fight for justice had just begun. When Heuermann walked into the courtroom for the first time, the world saw a towering man in handcuffs. 6'4", broad-shouldered, but strangely blank. Reporters described his expression as cold, detached, like a man inconvenienced by traffic, not accused of being one of the most prolific serial killers in modern American history. Family members of the victims sat in silence. Some wept, others glared. One whispered under her breath, "You don't scare us anymore." Prosecutors wasted no time. They laid out the trail of evidence. Burner phones used to contact the victims. Cell tower data, placing him near the crime scenes. Hair found on the victims, matching his DNA through a discarded pizza crust. And chilling online searches revealing his dark fantasies. Piece by piece, the puzzle became clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, meticulous, predatory. For years, the families of the Gilgo Four had been dismissed. They were told their daughters' lifestyles meant their cases weren't a priority. Now, they finally had their voices heard. At the hearings, they described their loved ones not as headlines, but as human beings, mothers, sisters, daughters who deserved to live. One father stood up and said, "My child wasn't perfect, but she was mine, and she deserved better than to be left in sand like garbage." The courtroom fell silent. Even Heuermann lowered his eyes. Outside, crowds gathered every day. Some held signs demanding justice. Others shouted curses as Heuermann was escorted into court. For Long Island, this was more than a trial. It was closure. It was the end of years of fear and the beginning of healing. But beneath the relief lingered unease. Because while prosecutors tied Heuermann to the Gilgo Four, other victims remained in shadows. Their cases unsolved, their families still waiting. Detectives admitted that even with Heuermann in custody, they couldn't say with certainty that every Gilgo victim was his. Some remains predated the Gilgo Four. Others didn't match his known patterns. Had Long Island been the dumping ground for more than one killer? Or had Heuermann been hunting longer than anyone realized? The uncertainty weighed heavy. But prosecutors knew one truth. If they focused on what they could prove, they might finally secure justice for at least some of the victims. As the trial progressed, Heuermann's double life unraveled. By day, he was a successful architect with wealthy clients. By night, he hid behind burner phones and false identities. The contrast was jarring. Neighbors described him as awkward, even forgettable. Yet investigators painted him as a man who meticulously planned, stalked, and silenced his victims. The turning point came when prosecutors revealed the recordings, phone calls he had made to victims' families. Distorted, cruel, taunting. In the courtroom, gasps echoed. For the families, it was proof that the faceless predator who tormented them was sitting just a few feet away. After months of testimony, the jury deliberated. When they returned, the courtroom braced itself. Guilty, on all counts tied to the Gilgo Four. The words hung in the air like a release. Some families sobbed with relief. Others sat stone-faced, their grief too deep for celebration. But one thing was certain, justice had spoken. Rex Heuermann was sentenced to life in prison without parole. For a man who had stolen so many futures, his own freedom was now gone forever. The judge's words were sharp. You hid behind the mask of an ordinary man, but your crimes stripped away any claim to humanity. You will never walk free again. Heuermann showed little reaction, but for the first time, families felt the weight lift from their shoulders. Long Island began to heal, but the scars remained. The Gilgo Beach murders were no longer a mystery in shadows. They were a reminder written in headlines, courtrooms, and graves. For the families, justice brought peace, but not closure. Closure would never come. Still, they found strength in knowing their loved ones were not forgotten, that the world finally saw their worth. The story of the Long Island serial killer is more than just the tale of a predator brought to justice. It is a warning that evil often hides in plain sight. that ordinary faces can mask extraordinary darkness, that silence and neglect can be as dangerous as violence itself. But it is also a lesson in resilience, because for more than a decade, these families refused to be ignored. They fought for their daughters, their sisters, their children, and in the end, their voices broke through. The American justice system may move slowly. It may falter, but sometimes it does deliver. And when it does, it reminds us all that evil does not win forever. Rex Heuermann will die behind bars, but Gilgo Beach is still a place of ghosts. Other victims remain nameless. Other killers may still walk free. The story is not finished, and the sand may yet reveal more secrets. But for now, justice, however imperfect, has been served. And that is the lesson the Long Island serial killer could never bury. If this story left you speechless, hit the like button to support the channel. Comment your theory below. Do you think Rex acted alone? Or is there more still hidden? Subscribe for more chilling true crime stories told like never before.